They have one of the more favorable strengths of schedules down, the rest of the way. So very much expect a playoff push, and think this is a team that, I mean, they can get up to, I think they're in position to make a push for a 6 seed, right? One of the things that the Warriors have been able to lean on, throughout their ups and downs, the 12-3 start, kind of their lull in the middle of the season before acquiring Jimmy Butler, is that the rest of the Western Conference looked the same way in a lot of ways. You have your kind of first tier, your teams at the top that have separated, but there's a logjam in the middle of those standings. So the fact that the Warriors were able to kind of go through the doldrums of the season and not be totally out of the race. And then you get a player like Jimmy Butler who, in 4 games, you've already seen his impact, gives him another playmaking hub, right? Big physical score. He can play 0.5 basketball, but he can also slow the game down, take over pace, control the action late in games.
He is a Golden State Warriors beat writer for the San Francisco Chronicle. We have the pleasure in welcoming Sam Gordon onto Hoopsology. Welcome, Sam.
How you doing, Justin? Appreciate you having me.
Thanks for coming on to the show. You've had a very busy weekend. We're recording this on just the aftermath of All-Star Weekend. So just a general question, have you been able to digest everything that's gone on this past weekend from just a local perspective? How was San Francisco hosting All-Star Weekend? Just your thoughts in terms of just how the NBA and San Francisco, how they work together to put this event on?
Yeah, great question. I think the San Francisco, Oakland, they were alive. I mean, there was the Bay Area was definitely activated for All-Star Weekend. You had all kinds of festivities, obviously at Chase Center, but then you go across to the East Bay, other side of the bridge, and Oakland Arena was active on Friday and Saturday, and that was really cool. Just considering the Warriors' history in Oakland, what they were able to accomplish, the fact that Steph Curry was able to go back and have a day at Oakland Arena. The fans there were really engaged and really enthusiastic, so that was awesome. And then, of course, the festivities on Saturday night, the game on Sunday, kind of all a blur. It went by really, really, really fast, but you could tell that the Bay Area, showed up and showed out for All-Star Weekend, and certainly, I think, represented well, all things considered, the last few days.
So, to the best of your estimation, the crowd for both All-Star Saturday and Sunday, if you had to guess in terms of who made up the audience, were there a lot of local fans there, or was it a different crowd than what you see out of Warriors game?
Certainly at Oakland Arena, it definitely felt local. It was hard to say on the crowd at Oakland Arena was certainly more engaged and more active and more with what was going on. In terms of who was there on Sunday, not necessarily, couldn't really necessarily tell.
Sure.
It was a packed house. There were a lot of spectators, but the engagement kind of came and went at times. Whereas we're at Oakland Arena, it was steady pretty much the whole time I was there for practices.
So the reason I ask is just a new format to the All-Star game. And I think everybody knows the reaction from kind of the audience watching on TV, mainstream pundits. But I kind of want to get like a local perspective to this new All-Star format with the tournaments and then how TNT produced this entire the broadcast. What were your thoughts from just being there, seeing it live, them execute it with Kevin Hart, like all these different Mr. Beast, like all these new elements that weren't there before, from just a live perspective? Was they kind of mirror what the television audience at home was watching, just in terms of, I think a lot of people were very upset just in terms of what they're watching just on their televisions or on their mobile devices. How was it from a live perspective being in the arena?
No, it was definitely allowed to stop and start. I mean, the ebbs and flows of the actual, the basketball itself, it was hard to develop, I think, a flow with all the production elements. But, from a basketball standpoint, I did think the basketball was a little bit more competitive, and it seemed like, all things considered, the players were able to have a good time with it. And that's, ultimately that's what this is about. I did my best to just kind of be present and be appreciative of what was going on. And, I'm there as a journalist. I'm there to cover the event. It's not for me. It's for fans. I'm there as a conduit to the fans. And yeah, it was definitely rigid and definitely a lot of stop and go. But, when the basketball got going, I think fans were able to enjoy it a little bit. And that was fun.
What do you think fans are missing from All-Star Weekend? That there's been a lot of talk just about like the format and just all like the kind of mainstream talking points. What do you think was missed from this past weekend that you wish was highlighted more?
It's tough for me to say. I just tried to to take it for what it was. I think All-Star Weekend was something that I really enjoyed as a kid, and I think generally speaking, it's more geared for a younger audience. And I try and kind of put myself in that perspective. Like maybe we're missing the nostalgia, and like we all kind of want what we don't have, and things have evolved. And Steph Curry said in his press conference he didn't want to compare it to previous ones. This is where we're at now. Could it use some work? Could it use some tinkering? Could there be a better flow? Yeah, for sure. Like all those things, could be true, but I don't, like in my recollection of what the game used to be, it's not like it was just game 7 of the NBA Finals competitive type atmosphere. It's always been a fun showcase designed for the players to have fun. And, if it got competitive at the end of the game, it got competitive at the end of the game. So ultimately, it's on the players to turn the weekend and what they want it to be. And I just try to appreciate it from a media perspective, be present for it, understand where I was at, and what I was doing, what I was able to be fortunate enough to do, and the ebbs and flows of the game were what they were. But yeah, it's the basketball. I think if there's any point of criticism I have, it's let's highlight the basketball, the production elements of the show, turning it into more of a variety show like that. It made it choppy, but the actual basketball was still fun, and we still saw some really cool. We saw the players do some really cool things, and if there was more of a focus on that, I think that the showcase would have gone a little bit more smooth.
Yeah, I agree. Let's shift to the Warriors, and it still pertains to All-Star Weekend. Draymond Green was on the panel on TNT, had some very poignant things to say. And one of those things was, correct me if I'm wrong, pretty much almost guaranteed a championship with the addition of Jimmy Butler. So where do you think the second half of the season, with Jimmy Butler being added to the squad, what do you make of their expectations moving forward? There's been a lot of talk in terms of what direction this franchise should go. I mean, to get a perennial all-star with Jimmy Butler, we know his track record, and with the Warriors, you have great coaching. The historical relevance of the Warriors is spoken for already. So, and especially with a Western Conference that is pretty unproven, anything can happen. So, what are your expectations moving for this team after the All-Star break?
Yeah, I mean, I think a playoff. I mean, 27 games left. They're 3-1 with Jimmy Butler. They have one of the more favorable strengths of schedules down, the rest of the way. So, very much expect a playoff push, and think this is a team that, I mean, they can get up to. I think they're in position to make a push for a 6 seed. Right, one of the things that the Warriors have been able to lean on, throughout their ups and downs, the 12-3 start, kind of their lull in the middle of the season before acquiring Jimmy Butler, is that the rest of the Western Conference looked the same way in a lot of ways. You have your kind of first tier, your teams at the top that have separated, but there's a logjam in the middle of those standings. So the fact that the Warriors were able to kind of go through the doldrums of the season and not be totally out of the race, and then you get a player like Jimmy Butler who, in 4 games, you've already seen his impact, gives him another playmaking hub, right? Big physical scorer. He can play 0.5 basketball, but he can also slow the game down, take over pace, control the action late in games. So there's the Warriors are definitely infused with confidence at this juncture, right? Still some things to sort out. Who's your wing stopper, your perimeter stopper against teams in those kind of settings, playoff kind of settings where you need a point of attack defender. Certainly, Butler can do that for stretches. Gary Payton II can do that for stretches. But in trading Andrew Wiggins, you have one of the best point of attack defenders in the NBA. Give you that kind of versatility. Can Jonathan Kuminga come back and be that? How do these small ball groupings look? A lot of things that the Warriors are going to kind of have to sort out during these last 27 games. But the fact that incorporating Butler has been so seamless because of his skill set, because of his ability to adjust to whatever a game needs, the Warriors have already felt that. So there's a lot of confidence, right? I mean, like you touched on, Draymond Green said what he said during the broadcast. Steph Curry comes out post-game and says that he, obviously heard it and loves having expectations. So, the standards are championship standards. Obviously, this franchise wants to win a 5th championship. Doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen. We understand how tough the teams are at the top of the West, but this puts them in the position. They get in a playoff series, you have the experience, you kind of have the cachet, and you have now the top end kind of frontline star power to make something happen if you were to get in the playoff series. So yeah, the expectations I think internally are high, and externally from my standpoint, definitely think this team is in position to make a push past the play and get into a series, and then you see what happens.
How has the franchise adjusted without having Klay Thompson from a basketball standpoint, but just his personality? I mean, I would say he's one third of what made the Warriors dynasty so great. I'm just curious. It's been some time since he's left the franchise now with the Mavericks. I'm just curious. Has there been any kind of I don't know, not missing him, but just kind of his presence is not felt, or has the franchise fully moved on? This is sports, so players get traded all the time. This is part of how big time sports works. But however, he played a massive part in the Warriors franchise. I'm just curious, just in terms of just Klay Thompson being missed, not only from a basketball standpoint, but just him as a human overall.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, it's we're past the All Star break now. The Warriors were just in Dallas playing against Klay Thompson again. So Curry was asked what it's like, and he more or less said it's still weird, but he's kind of adjusting to it. It's been I think they've played 3 times now. So yeah, it's you have to move on. It's part of it. Like you said, it's professional sports, but there was such a unique relationship, obviously, with Klay Thompson and the Bay, with what he was able to accomplish in 13 years here and how iconic that run was. I think from an on-the-court standpoint, the Warriors definitely missed him for a period of time, for a stretch. You get out to that 12-3 start. DeAnthony Melton goes down. They make the trade for Dennis Schroeder. Their offense is just never quite the same. They were a bottom 5 offense for a significant stretch of the season, and they miss his shooting gravity, right? I mean, it's not like the Warriors had this juggernaut offense last season, but feeling where they were at the bottom of the barrel for a significant stretch this season, and seeing how defenses were scheming up Steph Curry, not necessarily different from what we've seen in years past, but not having one of the other greatest shooters in NBA history on the weak side as an outlet for him, or drawing coverage, or Thompson still has gravity, right? So the Warriors, I think, from an off the court standpoint, yeah, it's been kind of you have to move on, but there's certainly an emotional kind of wistful part of it, especially from the fan base. That first game when he came back was really emotional. The Mavericks are here on the Sunday coming out of the break too, and you would expect Klay Thompson to get another warm welcome. He got a warm welcome when that game was when the Mavericks came here for the game that was made up for the in-season tournament. So yeah, they've had to move on. It is professional sports. They have missed his shooting at times, but now with Jimmy Butler, there's new energy, new enthusiasm, and this group understands that this is the group that they have, and they're moving forward and attacking a playoff push.
Can you discuss the fan base of the Warriors? I'm only interested in just different fan bases of all the teams around the league, especially with all the change with the new arena moving from Oakland to San Francisco. What is the fan base like? Has it remained the same in terms of the loyalty of their team, their expectations, or have you seen an evolution over the last few years with all the changes with the franchise, both on the court and off?
Yeah, that's hard for me to gauge, because I started on the beat in January of 2024. So all I've known from a journalistic perspective is covering games at Chase Center and doing at Chase Center. For the games are always packed. There's always generally enthusiasm, but I also understand the history at Oakland, the history at Oracle Arena, and over the course of All-Star Weekend, got to feel what that felt like. So I can only imagine what some of the differences. But generally speaking, the fan base is enthusiastic. It's passionate. This is a fan base that wants to win. It's a fan base that has enjoyed 4 championships in an 8-year period. So that there is high expectations. There is high standards for this fan base. And that's kind of the vibe I've gotten since I've been out here, for sure.
What are some of the other stories that you covered during All-Star Weekend that you think the mainstream media has not been discussing, but during your coverage that might get some more attention towards the second half of the season or beyond? Was there anything that you saw that might be kind of relevant coming up here in the next few months, you think, from this weekend specifically?
Not necessarily from this weekend. I mean, it was, again, it was interesting and cool to see all the best players, gathered at one spot. This was fortunate enough to cover my second All-Star Weekend, and just a kind of a time to pause and take stock at what this next 27 games is going to look like in the NBA. So you have the logjam in the Western Conference. You have obviously the Luka Doncic trade, I think still kind of reverberated throughout the league, and you kind of felt that over the course of the weekend. So seeing how that shakes out, what Luka Doncic's adjustment to LA looks like, kind of what the Dallas Mavericks look like going forward, is certainly one of the more marquee storylines. Not that it's not getting discussed. Of course, it's getting discussed, but that is, one of the major talking points, and something that I'm looking forward to seeing how that shakes out, beyond the trade that the Warriors made. So, the one of the more interesting trade deadlines, certainly in recent memory, and seeing how those pieces and how those teams come together coming out of deadlines, one of the things I'm most interested in. But from a big picture standpoint, felt like there was just kind of a collective pause from the league this weekend, taking a few days, and then teams are gearing up for the playoff push down the stretch.
Going back to the Warriors, just the future of this franchise, Steph Curry is headed towards the end of his career. We don't know how long he's going to play for, but, the end's in sight for him, which means that with this franchise, it's natural to think rebuild within the next few years. So where do you think that timeline is? Is it kind of hard to predict? Is it going to remain fluid just based on Steph Curry wanting to stay with the Warriors, as well as Draymond Green's future? Like, is that been some talk in terms of just resetting this franchise completely? Or as long as you have Draymond and Steph, it's, full tilt. It's every year until they retire. It's, pretty much the expectations are winning a championship. Is that what this franchise is kind of aiming towards? Or do you think there's been a little bit discussions of, retooling this team a little bit just because of just the experience and tenure of Draymond and Steph Curry?
Well, I think the trade for Jimmy Butler reflects the how aggressive the Warriors want to be, and to kind of build on that, Jonathan Kuminga, restricted free agent, due a contract extension this offseason. The Warriors have the intent to re-sign him, and that would take them most likely beyond the, of course, the luxury tax into the second apron. So there's a very realistic chance for in the second apron next year, and that would reflect the financial commitment towards maximizing this iteration of the Golden State Warriors, maximizing Steph Curry, Draymond Green, now Jimmy Butler, all three of them under contract through 26-27. And then, playing for Steve Kerr, who's under contract this year and then next year as well. You'd imagine that there's eventually again, just knowing that how Kerr, Green, and Curry have been tied in, would guess down the road there's going to be another extension there that is going to sync them up as well. So they're all in with this particular group. This is the group that they have. You have Curry, Butler, and Green as your centerpieces. You have Jonathan Kuminga, Brandon Podziemski, Moses Moody, Trace Jackson Davis, now Keith Santos, Quentin Post as this young group that's developing. And now they have 27 games to kind of take stock and take account of what this looks like, see where they're at, in the playoffs, or see what any kind of postseason push looks like, and then kind of figure out if there's any retooling, what kind of retooling, what kind of additions they need to make this summer. But to me, the Butler trade reflected, and giving him a 2-year, $112 million extension, that reflected the urgency that this franchise has. They want to compete. They want to win championships, compete for championships. And if you're not competing for championships, right, we understand how difficult that is, and where the Warriors are at right now, kind of in the big picture of the West. But you want to give yourself the absolute best chance that you have. And with the playoff pedigree that this group has, now adding Jimmy Butler to the fold for 2 more years, the future for this franchise is very much now, and they'll figure out the retooling, kind of the bigger picture retooling stuff after that. But they want to win, and the Butler trade, signifies the aggressive approach that ownership has, and that the Warriors franchise has in general with this season and the next 2, as they kind of maximize or seek to maximize the rest of Stephen Curry's career.
Besides the Luka Doncic trade, are there any observations from the Western Conference that you have noticed just in the first half of the season? Just in terms of, we touched on it earlier in terms of this, it's pretty wide open in terms of anything can happen, but specifically with any teams that are ahead of the Warriors, have you observed anything that's shocked you, surprised you as we enter towards the second half of the season?
Not necessarily shocked or surprised. I think you look at the teams at the top of the Western Conference and just the top teams in the NBA in general. There's themes, right? At multiple point of attack defenders, versatile defensively. Oklahoma City, Houston, Memphis fit that bill in the Eastern Conference. Of course, the Celtics won by constructing a really versatile defensive team, guys that can all put the ball on the floor as well. So the game plan, the blueprint is out there. I think it's interesting. The Warriors have played the Thunder as great as the Thunder have been this season. And again, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in MVP mode. You have a fleet of versatile wings around him that can all do things with the ball, multiple bigs, really complete roster. You take a look at kind of what they have, that they fit that formula. having a go-to scorer and then two-way wings around them. But the Warriors have played them really well this year. They've beaten them 2 out of 3 times, and they came back to beat them, but came back from down a double-figure margin to beat them here, a couple weeks ago in San Francisco. So they've matched up really well with the Thunder, even though the Thunder have, I guess you could say, the most kind of modern championship contending roster right now in the Western Conference. So that's been really interesting to see how they match up. I think it's been difficult to kind of take stock of where the Warriors fit in the equation because now they have Jimmy Butler and he changes everything. But yeah, logjam in the Western Conference. I think we're going to get a good gauge here of what teams are going to separate. And, it'll be fun to see what happens in the Eastern Conference as well with where teams are at the top of the conference, seeing how well Cleveland's been playing. To what extent does that carry over in the postseason? What does Boston have in terms of their title defense? Are they going to rev it up here and go into playoff mode after what felt kind of like, coasting through this part of the season so far? So still a lot to sort out the last 27 games. We're going to see how it goes.
It's interesting you mentioned the Warriors, how they have bested the Thunder this season. That's not a narrative that's been talked about. Do you think that, and that's surprising, just based on the Warriors' track record in years past, you would think that'd be a controlling narrative, but that's not been. Does that play to their advantage? Are they kind of under the radar and not having the pressure, like the expectations from just a national perspective? The eyes are not on them. So I don't think they have that pressure. They can just, be organic just in terms of the expectations they have as a franchise. They're not worried about, being the defending champions or having expectations of winning the title from every single media outlet. They can just go out there and play. Does that kind of work to their advantage in terms of that narrative? They've beaten the top team in the conference twice, like you said. Does that work to their advantage in terms of just kind of falling under the radar a little bit towards the second half, you think?
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah. I mean, I think when you have a team like the Warriors and given kind of their internal expectations of what they've accomplished, there's always a desire, again, to compete at the championship level. But now you have, again, 27 games to figure it out. You add Jimmy Butler, a 6-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA. He's been a perfect fit so far with his malleable skill set. Gives them another offensive hub, somebody to play through late in games, somebody to occupy defensive attention. So Steph Curry can do what he does and doesn't have to get swarmed by those kind of defensive schemes all game long. Now has another outlet. Like there's an internal belief and internal confidence that this team can make something happen. And they have playoff pedigree and playoff experience. So if you're a 6-7, if they can get in as a 7 or 8 seed, if they're in a playing situation, that's something that they can kind of trust, believe that it can go to and trust in and turn to in any kind of playoff series. So yeah, they're not, maybe the external expectations of not being what they have been in the past, kind of eases things. But this is a team internally that has high expectations, that has confidence now that they can make a playoff push, and now is in position to kind of see what they can do the last 27 games and get into a series. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out for sure.
Last question for you. I want to ask about Draymond Green. What's your opinion of him? Is he misunderstood, or are the opinions of kind of your mainstream basketball fans right on about him? Just in terms of his personality, like he's very polarizing, and it seems like there's a lot of wild opinions about him just in terms of what he brings to a team. I think if you watch basketballs, his impact on the court goes beyond the stat sheet. What do you think of him overall, just as a role as a player on this team? Do you think that he's misunderstood, or do you think it's spot on just based on you covering him?
Well, I think Draymond and I have had, since I've been here, a great professional working relationship. That's all I can go off of from what I've seen. He's still on the court, of course, remains one of the best defenders in the NBA, and their small ball lineups ultimately, I think, are going to what they're going to lean on in big spots and in big situations. We've seen the Warriors turn to the small ball starting lineup with Draymond Green at center a couple times just since the Jimmy Butler has arrived. And ultimately, again, I think that throughout the course of their run, their superpower in terms of from a lineup standpoint has been that he's been able to, obviously, right, the Splash Brothers, Steph Curry. There's a number of things that make this team great. Steph Curry's is the defining, the superpower. He's the defining player for this particular run. But all the pieces work together, right? And we understand the maximization of this run and this impact has been in part because of Draymond Green's ability to play center, to play to give Warriors favorable to give the Warriors favorable matchups with his ability to guard up, and he can still do that effectively. And those lineups have been really effective. From a leadership standpoint, as far as I can tell, he's been great in terms of setting the tone throughout the course of the season. This year, the Warriors, through all their ups and downs, never got too high, never got too low, as far as I can tell it. And now they're totally engaged with what they believe to have a chance to win, to make a push these last 27 games. So he's going to be essential to that. As far as what the perception of him is, elsewhere, I can't necessarily speak on that. But I know that he's been vital to what the Warriors want to do and what they plan to do this season. And again, we'll see how that shakes out with his experience, with his leadership down the stretch. There are going to be things that the Warriors count on these last 27 games for sure.
Sam, thank you very much for joining the show. Really appreciate it. Can you let our audience know where you can find you on social media, any upcoming projects, and where they can catch your work at as well?
Yep, I'm on Twitter or X now, I guess, right? These days at by Sam Gordon. And then you can find my work at sfchronicle.com. We're picking everything up out of the All-Star break today. So again, gearing you up for the last third of the season, these last 27 games. And again, everything on sfchronicle.com. You can follow along there, or on X at by Sam Gordon.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Sam. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Justin. Appreciate you having me.